25 people have died in floods in Kwazulu-Natal, and there's been an enormous disruption to business and livelihoods. Let's take you to KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala. Premier Zikalala, good evening to you. Thanks for your time tonight. It's been absolutely devastating to see the impact of these floods in part of your province. Let's begin with perhaps the search and rescue operations that are currently underway. How many people are still being looked for here? And what are the numbers in terms of the displacements?
Well, we can confirm that about 80 people have been displaced in various areas, but mostly in Ladysmith. We cannot confirm actually how many people are lost. Currently, the teams are looking and searching all over. We are worried about these devastating storms that have affected us in various areas, but they've left damage, especially on property, both public and private, such as schools, such as roads and bridges, but also private property, in particular houses, and then commercial properties.
Let's talk about the responses and the approach that you as the provincial government then have in place from a disaster management perspective, because when we speak to climatologists, geologists, none of them really seem to be surprised by the fact that we're having this type of weather. In fact, they're predicting that the storms that we have, the extreme weather, is only going to worsen over the years. So as a provincial department, how are you ensuring that the responses that you have to these adverse weather events are appropriate and that, you know, there's as minimal risk to lives as possible?
Well, the first plan is to build the infrastructure that is resilient, which can withstand any form of a storm or disaster. The second plan is to always ensure that when it comes to residential areas, people are warned and not allowed to build residential homes in areas that can be affected by storms or in wet land. The third area is to improve on drainage systems in the cities which are normally affected, like your Ladysmith, Umsinga, and others. All of this is well coordinated under COGTA, and we are working on the plan to ensure that we implement that plan to be futuristic. We don't only have to plan for now, we need to plan for even the future.
An area like Ladysmith is already identified as a hotspot for high flooding, because it seems to be well known that, you know, where the CBD is actually just around or slightly below the river levels there. And yet we saw the visuals. The water there is absolutely still. It's not flowing in any direction. So the stormwater drainage system seems to be overwhelmed, but because the river is full, there's no movement of that water. So how are you going to respond to that?
We are looking on the matter with a team of engineers who can help us to design a plan that will ensure that the river does not spill into the town. And that design will have to be implemented with speed. It is important that we avoid any future damage. We must say we've suffered a lot, both as government but also the private sector, knowing that retail stores and various offices were flooded. As a result, the property is destroyed, and going forward we need to avert such a situation to occur again.
You know, there was one geologist, Dr. Groenewald, who suggested that, you know, for an area like Ladysmith, in an ideal world, the areas that have been built on, particularly in the CBD that have been worst affected, that particular piece of land should have never been used for occupation in the way that it has been. So when it comes to some of the studies that are done before municipalities are granting, whether it's business or individuals, permission to build, do you think that enough work is being done there just to make sure that in the cases of future floods, because we will be here again in the future, the impact is less devastating?
I agree with that study, which is correct, but the problem is that in some areas, you find that people will want to go ahead and build, even after being advised not to build in those areas. It is important that we enforce regulations, including bylaws, including spatial planning, and therefore it will help us to avoid building in areas that are not demarcated for either residential or commercial, and we will have to enforce that. I think also we need to build the capacity of the municipalities in terms of planning and in terms of ensuring that people adhere and those regulations are enforced.
How many municipalities in your province right now have declared a state of disaster? Do you know?
Well, obviously, it's the Umgungundlovu area, the Ilembe, and some areas of Utugela, which include Ladysmith.
How much is it going to take the provincial department to actually rebuild some of the infrastructure that's there? And I'm referencing here specifically schools, hospitals, and the things that fall within the provincial ambit.
For schools alone, we can estimate that it is going to be above 200 million. Yet we are still doing assessment with other departments like health, like Department of Transport in relation to roads and bridges, Department of Human Settlement where houses were destroyed. So we are still doing an assessment on that.
All right, undoubtedly going to continue to be a very costly affair. KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala, let's leave it there for tonight.